Hello, and welcome to the BYU Family History Library webinar series. We're glad you could join us today. I'm Olivia Tuller, and I'll be your host for this webinar. If you have technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You are welcome to use the chat box during the webinar for comments, insights, and questions. However, all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our next webinar is on July 21st with Maureen Brady. She will be giving a presentation entitled, "You Too Can Read Old Handwriting." If you would like to access a previous webinar, please visit our webinar index on our website or search on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are recorded and uploaded by the following Monday for your convenience. We also post links to recordings and other updates on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. For today's webinar, we are pleased to hear from James Tanner, who will be giving a presentation on using the Internet Archive, archive.org, for serious genealogical research. Before we begin, here is a little bit about James. James has over 40 years experience in genealogical research and is an avid blogger of Genealogy's Star blog. He has served as a family history volunteer for 18 years and has presented at expos and conferences around the US, Canada, and Europe. He is a member of the board of directors of the Family History Guide Association and is currently serving at the BYU Family History Library. James is a professional photographer and has 7 children, 34 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. If James is ready, we will turn the time over to him.
Thank you. I will go ahead and share my screen. We're glad everyone's here today. I'd like to remind you that the BYU Family History Library has a virtual help desk, which is available from the BYU Family History Library website, which will connect you directly to the library in a Zoom program and let you confer with one of the over 100 missionaries that are in the library. We're going to be talking today on a subject that is very important called using the Internet Archive for serious genealogical research. And the Internet Archive is probably one of the lesser known huge resources that we have out there. And becoming now one of the most valuable if it moves into the same category as the large online websites as far as the value and the amount of information which it contains that is useful to us. Let's get moving here. One qualification is important. It's to start out that old books are good for genealogy. Now, in the time now today where we're involved in the internet and things are changing constantly and programs are becoming new and old models of computers, and computers come out every year and everything's new. There's a sort of an attitude, general attitude, and it's among genealogists also that old stuff is out of date and perhaps it's not as accurate. And there's not as many source citations. So how valuable could it be? And the answer to that question is very simple. Old books, genealogy doesn't change, and old books have the same genealogy that we're going to use today. The problem with old books is the same problem you have with all genealogy, any online family tree. It's if you can find the source material, then it's absolutely more helpful. But you have to remember that if a book was actually published in 1880, then the person who wrote the book, and he talks about a family, was alive in 1880, and the people he was talking about were his or her contemporaries. And so some of the information is firsthand. So we need to remember that old genealogy is good, still good genealogy. So books are an extremely valuable resource for genealogy because so many of them were published long before we had digital files and online resources. So let's get some perspective about what's happening online with genealogical resources right now. And I'm going to give you 2 examples. Now, many of you may have thought about at some point in your genealogical research of visiting the Library of Congress as a vast resource. And it's commonly, the Library of Congress is commonly touted as being the largest library in the world. And just a couple of statistics here. They have 171,636,507 items in their collections. Now, this is a fairly recent date, a number from the website, from the Library of Congress website, which, by the way, is loc.org, loc.org. And they have approximately 25 million catalog books in the Library of Congress classification system. By the way, not all that material is stored in the building here in Washington, D.C. that's in the screenshot here, because there's too many to go in the library, so they store them in warehouses. Your experience in the library can be quite different than you might expect, because when you go to the Library of Congress, you may find out that the material you're looking for, even if you're able to find it in the catalog, is not available immediately in the library, and it may take 2 or 3 days for the material to be transferred from a warehouse to the library. So doing research in the Library of Congress is not as straightforward as it would be, for example, at the Family History Library in Salt Lake City or the BYU Family History Library. But the question is, what about the resources of the Library of Congress? Well, we're going to look at the other. Okay, so basically, I'm sorry, this comes up. Few of the items are directly available digitally online for free. I think I need to make that clear too, that not all the collections of the Library of Congress, only a very, very few things have been actually digitized and are made available for free. A lot of the items have been migrated into paywall or subscription websites, but there's other ways of, there are other items, there's a lot of other items, but of the total number of items in the collections, very few relatively have been digitized. Now, let's talk about the Internet Archive, or archive.org. It's an American digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. That was the goal. The founder of the Internet Archive was a philanthropist, a rich person whose name is Brewster Cayley. And Brewster was his vision was to make everything in the universe, all the information of everything that was available on the earth, available for free. And so he has gone about building with many, many other people involved and funding from many, many other organizations have built this fabulous resource. So what do we have here? We have, this is from the menu for for archive.org, the Internet Archive. You have 682 billion web resources. That's an approximate number. What this means, and I'll explain each of these that are pertinent in more detail, but they also have texts that include books, and that's 35 million of those, and 7.9 million videos. And I'm talking about videos that have been uploaded to this particular website, including, for example, all the old videos that you were shown in school when you were a kid, some of the government instructional videos that have been made over the history, plus historical videos, plus anything else that the Internet Archive can obtain. These aren't the kinds of things like YouTube videos. They are videos that were made for other purposes. And then they have audio files, 14 million audio files. And the audio files contain everything from radio programs to speeches that were given. Practically anything that could be audio recorded is in this huge collection of audio files. And then there's TV programs. And right now there's about 2.4 million of these TV programs, primarily news programs. But, and if you want to watch a really old program, situational comedies, whatever, that was famous or online back in the 1950s or whatever, They're probably right here on the Internet Archive. Software, 841,000 software programs, including all the original computer games like Pong and all of those different ones that were on the old computers. And they've been updated and made available on PCs and on Apple computers software programs. And then they have 4.3 million images. This is a growing part of the Internet Archive because they're collecting images from all over. And those images, everything, by the way, I'm going to emphasize, everything on here is absolutely free. And it's also free of any copyright claims unless it's specifically specified. And I'll explain a little bit about that. But there's almost everything here is on is basically on the internet for free. Then we have images. I mentioned concerts. These are musical concerts recorded. I might mention, as I always do, that there are about 11,000 Grateful Dead concerts completely on the Internet Archive. There's just an unimaginable amount of information. Anything that doesn't fit in these categories goes into the collections category, and there's an extra 1.3 million there. So what happens is we have the Internet Archive with more than 682 billion items, as opposed to the Library of Congress with 171 million items. So there's thousands of times more items than there are in the Library of Congress. Now, are there overlap? You better believe there are. In other words, there's lots of books and lots of records that are in the Library of Congress that are also on the Internet Archive, because the Internet Archive is not discriminatory. They basically take almost everything that you can imagine that they can digitize. Anything they can put into the collection, they'll do that. Okay, so here's the problem. I think the real problem with the Internet Archive is don't fall into the black hole of the Internet Archive. Once you get into it and you start seeing all of the information and types of things that are there, it's pretty persuasive that you'll spend time looking at old TV shows, or that you'll start to listen to the concerts, or you might just wonder at all the books there are and everything else that's there. And so I've just kind of cautioned people that it's one of those kind of black hole websites where there's so much information. It's like YouTube, actually, because there's so much information that you just become sort of fixated with the information that's available. And to give you an idea, if you understand computer storage, the Internet Archive houses more than 10 petabytes of petabox storage. Petabox storage is technology that's been developed by the Internet Archive that makes the storage cheap, affordable, and easy to transport. Actually, they have established their archives as backups all over the world. So they have different places where all this information is being stored. And they've developed that technology, and they actually sell the technology to other people and to countries and things like that. And this is expanding steadily, and I'll kind of illustrate that how it's expanding. Now, the simplest way to get into the Internet Archive is to put in a search for whatever you're looking for, like a name of a person, information about a place, a small town, an archive, a record, a history, whatever you're looking for, and put the word Internet Archive after your search, and then or put archive.org. And so what will happen is Google will do the search for all the possible records, but those that are actually in the Internet Archive will usually come up first, or very near the beginning of the search terms. So basically, access to the Internet Archive can be done directly through Google without having to go to the Internet Archive to do a search. But you can do searches on the Internet Archive, which are also very productive because they have an advanced search technology that is very effective and very helpful to find information. So now I'm going to talk a little bit specific about some of the things that are going to benefit people directly, and particularly genealogists who are doing work in trying to find the history of their families and all the individuals. The Wayback Machine is the 682 billion web pages. And what has happened is for many, many years, the Internet Archive has been archiving the Internet. That's why it's called the Internet Archive. And so they are recording all of these old websites. Now, this is a little bit hard to get into. You can get into it if you know the address or URL or some keywords from the website. If you do that, then you can do some searches. It's not straight as forward unless you do know the exact URL. In other words, the address, the original address of the website you're looking for. These are websites that have long been abandoned or not available or gone. And so all the information is preserved in the way of a timeline showing each segment of information, like screenshots of the website and all the pages of the website, so that you can go back and reconstruct almost any website that was created since the beginning of the internet. And this is very interesting. I used this in a presentation that I did for the BYU Family History Library not too long ago about the history of Family Search's website, of the FamilySearch.org website and the RootsTech websites. And all the screenshots and everything that I used for that presentation came from the Wayback Machine. So it's a tremendous resource, especially if somebody had a website and they passed away and it's now off the internet or whatever, and you were looking for that information. Here's another comparison. FamilySearch.org has about 500, well, the most recent number, 541,529 digital books. Now, what you'll find on the FamilySearch.org website is that many of these books are still copyrighted. And when you you'll find the book, it'll be there, the digital copy of it, but it'll say, can't get access to the book because permission has not been obtained. By the way, if you're wanting to donate a book to Family Search that you've made, a family history book of your own or whatever that one of your relatives has done, be sure and give them permission to make it public so other people can see the book. Otherwise, they're going to have to wait until the book comes out of copyright, which could be 75 years. So what you want to do is be sure the information that you give to the FamilySearch.org is not copyrighted information, or if it is, that you have released the rights to Family Search to make it public. Now, how does this compare to the Internet Archive? So here's the Internet Archive, and we're going to focus right here on this. This number, by the way, has changed, gone up almost 1 million records in the last week, 1 million books in the last week. And this is 35 million books. This is 35 million books that are completely digitized and completely available, and with only a few exceptions, relatively few exceptions, are downloadable to your computer, and you can get the whole book. And as far as genealogy books are concerned, there are so many things in here that are totally impressive that it's hard to even vocalize what's going on here with all these books. They come from all over the world, and they're in all different languages, and it's not necessarily an English language website. Everything on the website is English as far as the website's concerned, but as far as the materials are concerned, they're in all the different languages of the world, any book that they can possibly get. And this number exceeds any other completely open and accessible resource that I'm aware of, including Google's books, including any other any other institution or website. So what are we looking for? Well, let's say we want to look for a current book. Well, part of the Internet Archive is called the Open Library. And all you have to do for the Open Library is to sign up. Get an account and sign up. There's no charge, there's no obligation. And then you can read free library books online. And there are millions and millions of these books. And these books are new, some of them are new books. And they are they're under copyright, but you check out the books. Some of you may be familiar with the program used across the United States in public and other libraries called Overdrive. Overdrive has a copy of the book, and they will allow the libraries to share copies of the book up to a certain number of copies for a period of time, usually 14 days, 2 weeks. Well, the Open Library does exactly the same thing as Overdrive, except they're not affiliated with a particular library. These are all the books on the archive, millions of books, not just a few thousand books that may be on the larger subscriptions to Overdrive. Are there brand new books on this? The answer to that is probably not. You're probably not going to find your best-selling books off somebody's list on the Open Library, because they are focusing on books that generally are not available through the present media sale. For example, books that are currently for sale. They focus on getting books that are not focusing. Now, that's the important thing, because you think about that. Nobody really has ever had, well, very few, almost none, of the genealogy books that I'm aware of have ever gotten anybody's bestseller list. They are books that are usually published a very limited number of copies, and they find their ways into libraries, and this is how they get to the Internet Archive. So what can you look for? If you're getting onto the Internet Archive, what is it that you're going to try to find? And the answer to that is almost anything. So let's say you want to find out about your surname. You'll see there's a link. If you look carefully at this screenshot, you'll see that I wrote in Tanner Genealogy just as an example. And then I clicked on Search Text Contents. That means it will search complete texts of every book in their collection, all 35 million of them. So any book in any place, from any place that comes out with the word, in this case, either the word Tanner or genealogy, will show up here. So there's 112,030 books that show up in this particular search. And a lot of these are straight genealogy books. They've even got genealogy on the cover. And they are books that you may or may not, as a researcher, have even imagined existed. And so there's also an advanced search, as you can see with the little blue notice there, where you click and get an advanced search. And I'm not going to go into how to use the advanced search, but it helps you to narrow down this 112,000 down to something a little more manageable. But this is just an example of what you can do. Can you put in a person's name? Yes, you can. Can you put in, like, for instance, your ancestor was Thomas Parkinson, and he was from Australia. And so you put in Thomas Parkinson and put down Australia, and that will find you any book in which that particular person was mentioned, and in conjunction with Australia. So yes, this is just a very powerful search engine, and you can find that. But I remind you, you can also do the same searches from Google by simply adding Internet Archive or archive.org to your search, and then it will include any of the information here. Now, if it's a general search like that, if you start putting in your own surname and start searching, you're going to get a huge number of items. So you need to tailor your searches to be more specific, and then you'll get more information. Now, how does this work? Well, if if I have one of these books online, then I can sit there and read the book right on the Internet Archive. Now, what happens if the book's in copyright? Well, if the book is copyrighted and it's on the Internet Archive, they will have permission to let you read it online. You may have to do that 1 hour at a time. So the minimum, the beginning time limit is 1 hour. Well, you can find out a lot of information for the book in 1 hour, but you can also keep renewing it for an hour. The only reason you couldn't renew it if someone else was trying to read the same book. Now, if you're looking at old genealogy books, chances you run into somebody who's trying to look at the same book are awfully slim. So basically what you're doing here, and if the book is, if they have a little bit of more permission from the publisher of the book, then these are the books that be copyrighted, not the old books. The old books will all come out as either completely available online if they're out of copyright, or if their copyright is sort of in question, then you may be able to check it out for an hour or for 2 weeks. If you check it out for 2 weeks, you can come back to the Internet Archive and find it again and again and work your way through the book. Can you download the book? If the book is not in that category of read the book online, you can download this whole book. Just basically go down, and I'll show you how that happens in just a minute. Oh, forgot to get into local histories. This is one of the most valuable places because just in this last week, I was working with someone, and the person they were interested in, and we found some information online that said that this person was one of the original pioneers in a county, and this county was in Iowa. And basically, if you go to the Internet Archive and look specifically for history of that particular county, because the person came there as an early pioneer, chances are that person's in the book. And there may be enough information there to find out who they were, where they came from, and all the information that you may not have ever been able to find anyplace else. And so these are just fabulous resources. And this kind of illustrates that these books are, and this county history, for example, this one's of Iowa, completely searchable word by word. And when you do a search, it will put up the page and all the text from the page. It will read the text. And so they will show you where that word is, or your search term is. And then if you look down at the bottom, just below where the book image is, you'll see results. It's hard to see on this because there's a little blue line there. That shows you that there's one result in this book. And if you clicked on that one result, it would go directly to that page. And I'll show you that in just a minute. So here's this same book. And if you're wondering about the information about the book itself, you need to know that the history of Clayton County, Illinois, that's the full title. Okay, so you get the complete title of the book. You get a complete citation, a publication date, the topics, the publisher, the collection. It's not in any specific format, but the information you need to put it in any one of the major formats, from MLA to Turabian or whatever, is all available here. And then it will also tell you the formats in which the book can be downloaded. Now, this book has had 6,480 views and been made a favorite by 3 people. And it came from, if you look at the bottom down there, it came from the New York Public Library and another library called American Libraries. Now, the formats, the download options here may not be something that you're familiar with, all of those, but some of them you might be familiar with are EPUBs, which are readable files in any reader that does EPUBs, like Adobe readers and things like that. But there's also a Kindle reader. You can a Kindle format if you want to read it in Amazon's Kindle. You can put it into PDF, and then it's uploadable and you can put it on your smartphone, your iPhone, or your iPad or tablet and read it with as a PDF file. It's also called, there's also a torrent file, which is a specialized kind of a file that works with some programs. So there's all these different file formats that you can pull it down. The other one is full text, which means that it turns it into a text document that you could then copy and edit. You can also copy PDFs. You can also copy EPUBs. So getting quotes and getting the information out of the books once they're downloaded off the Internet Archive is readily possible. So here's a couple of other examples. We have the Narragansett Historical Register, and this is a magazine. It was a publication, and I looked up Tanner genealogy, and there were 74 results. And these are the little blue marks that I said were along the bottom. And each one of those goes directly to the page where that search was made. Now, I could have been more specific in my search and searched for a specific name of an ancestor. And then if that name came up, it would be marked along the bottom there, and you'd get that into. You can see if you go over a little bit further over from where I'm pointing with that pop-up, is that there's a way of looking at single pages, double pages, 4 pages up. There's a way to transfer it, to listen to it in audio file. And there's a plus and minus that lets you zoom in or out of the text. And these are very high quality digital images, so you'll get all the detail. And you can see again on the other side, there's another Tanner genealogy book, and that's actually a book about the Tanners. So when you look down at the bottom, there's almost a solid blue bar. So that tells you that you got to come up with more specific search terms, because you either end up reading the entire book, or you can get more specific and have the book, have it look for an individual's name or a place or whatever. Now, just to start out, very early when the Internet Archive was still getting established, they obtained the original copies of the census records that were available. Of course, they don't have the 1890 census, no one does. But for all the other census records, through census years from 1872, from 1870 to 1930, I think that I guess they might have the 40 census in here now. I haven't looked at that. Yes, they do. They have the 1840. I mean, 1790 to 1930. They have all of the census records. Okay. These are the original microfilm images, not, well, you might not even realize that the images that you see on the big websites, on digital websites like Family Search and Ancestry, have been edited, quite a bit edited for clarity. They've cleaned them up. There's been a lot of work done on those images. But when you get to the images on the Internet Archive, you get the original images. And there's an interesting reason to look at the original images, is because there's more information there. Because some of the changes that were made by the enumerators, by the people who gathered the information, are available here. You can see how the things have been changed, and sometimes they're not as clearly marked and easily to understand as they are on the copies that have been made later. Okay, so now we find out that there are major collections of records that have just recently become available, that have been put on the Internet Archive as one of the main places where the records are available. They may also have migrated over to some of the other websites, but primarily, this is a group called Reclaim the Records, which is a record website, a very interesting website. What they've been doing over the past few years is bringing a series of Freedom of Information Acts against the governments of various states, like primarily New York, New Jersey, and some of the eastern states, but there's others in here, to free up the records that have been made, that have been only put into paywalls, and or they have been unavailable at all. And because of Freedom of Information Acts, they have gone to court and forced the governments to give them copies of the records, which they have then given to the Internet Archive. They also maintain copies on their website, and some of them do end up in the larger websites such as Family Search. Usually, because they were under a paywall originally, they simply do not want to put them on a paywall website. So you won't see these on Ancestry or another website that has a charge. So this is another way of accessing these records is on the Internet Archive. And you might be very, very surprised that there are records on here that you have tried to look for and have never been able to find, or have been told are unavailable because they're in New York. This is an important thing in part of the books, and emphasize again that they're just vacuuming in all the kinds of information that they get. There's nothing, they do really have a bent towards preserving genealogical information. That's something that's part of their goal, but that's not the only thing. And genealogical information just comes in because it happens to be in all these libraries that they work with to digitize books. So this is, for example, of a book that was transcribed, and this is volume 2 of 1665 to 1674 in Salem, Massachusetts. These records may no longer be available. They may not be even, they may have been lost. They may have gone in a fire since this book was transcribed them back in 1917. So there's a lot of these old books that are transcripts of earlier records, Bible records, all sorts of records out there. They have, the Internet Archive has also obtained full runs of all sorts of genealogical journals and other publications. And they're all completely digitized, completely searchable, indexed word by word, and as good a digitized pictures as could possibly be made. And you can page through them page by page and read the entire publication anytime. The little arrows down at the bottom there below the picture of the register there just page you right through page by page one. And then you can also click on results, and it'll jump to find that particular person where the blue line is marked. So if I click on that, I was looking for Hezekiah Teft, and if you read through this about 6 lines down, it says Sarah and Hezekiah Teft married 23, 1775 in Richmond Town Records, from the Richmond Town Records. It's interesting because this kind of information has not, as I'm doing research, particularly on the Teft and the Kenyon lines, which both names show up on this page because they all lived in Rhode Island, in Richmond. And so some of these records I have not seen before. Many times I will go into the Internet Archive and find this kind of a book or register where the information has simply not shown up in any of the records that I've been able to search. So it's my opinion about the value of it comes from personal experience of having found things that were otherwise totally not part of anything else I found, except in the Internet Archive. So here's, like, for example, the Rhode Island Historical Society collections, and they're all there. And this is a search for Historical Society collections. And on the right-hand side, you can see the 89 results of the journals and historical collections for Arizona history, and all of the different ones that have been digitized. Now, a lot of us think that there's big newspaper collections out there, and it's true. And I won't maintain that the Internet Archive has any kind of an exhaustive collection of newspapers. There are some other dedicated newspaper sites like newspapers.com and the Library of Congress chronicling American chronicling history newspaper collection that have millions of pages of newspapers. But there are some very specific newspapers, and they're completely searchable also here on the Internet Archive. City directories. Basically, if you look for city directories, you will find that there are a substantial number. And then again, they may be available someplace else, but if they're available on a major website, they may be behind a paywall. Here, they're free. They're not only free, you could download that entire book, entire directory if you wanted to, if you had any reason to do that. If you need to copy the page, you simply copy that page easily and turn it into a JPEG image or a PDF image. Just to go on, this is another place. I realize there are some very large old map collections online, like the Rumsey map collection, but there's a fabulous number of maps here on the Internet Archive, and it's just hard to imagine the kinds of things that you find when you start looking. It's hard to think this is like kind of a subset of the internet, because the breadth of all of the kinds of information that are here are kind of a general reflection of what's out there on the internet. Although this is all kind of codified, organized, word searchable, and put in a format that makes it very easy to use. It's just very easy to page through these books page by page and see every page of these books. Now, I mentioned earlier that you can check out new books that are still under copyright protection. And there's millions of these available. So basically, you can see from the top that you can borrow for 1 hour or borrow it for 14 days. And once you've done it, if you've borrowed it for 14 days, that means it stays on your Internet Archive account. So if you go to internetarchive.org, it'll be under your link. It'll say borrowed books or your book, what books you have. And then you just click and you're in there in the book, and it will remember where you read to if you want to continue to read it, or you can basically copy information once again out of the books. So it's just an endless source. Now, obviously, after everything I've said, that they do have books that are directly about genealogy. So if you start looking for genealogy books, you're going to find a lot of books on here that talk about genealogy. This is one very useful book. This is the first edition of the book back some time ago, and it has now had some subsequent editions of it that are available. But this is the entire book, searchable, and this one you could borrow for an hour. You may be able to borrow it for longer, but you may only need it for an hour. So just remember to look on the Internet Archive when you think about some resource that's not available elsewhere online. Now, I would suggest also that you remember to look at the Internet Archive when you get you started. So that may be your leg up that you didn't realize. Now, an example of this is I began working on some of my end of lines, and one of my end of line people is a Teft, T-E-F-F-T. And I did some research on family search, and I did research on, and they were in New England, and I did research in our ancestry, and I did general searches online. And the general searches online took me to some books. And I found out that the books were on the archive because I went down and looked at where the books were listed. And it said Teft Family of America. And there was a book online. And I saw that it was in the Internet Archive. So I immediately went to the Internet Archive, did the search, found the book, and was able to download the entire book. So now I have that sitting on my desktop. And the question you might ask, well, how accurate is it? What sources did it have? This particular book had not only complete family listings with all the birth, marriage, and death information that was known, but had paragraphs and paragraphs describing the actual records where this information came from, the wills, the probate files, the land records, and referencing out to those records. Now, it's obviously not as convenient as the internet, where you can click on a link and go directly to a source. But in the books here, that gives you a tremendous amount of leg up information that'll help you to get ahead and not have to do research that has obviously now been done for, in this case, over 100 years and is in a book. So, and remember, as I said at the beginning, the people who wrote these books lived a lot closer to those people than you do. And so their information, although some of it may not be correct, that's not unusual. That's not something that you, even if you find original records, some of those are not as correct as they could be. But using that information and not knowing that it's there and not using it because you're unaware of the Internet Archive is really something that you can and should avoid. Okay, well, thanks for watching. Appreciate all those that have been here. And if you have any questions, we can go look in the chat and see what we've got to say. Okay, just to mention, question is, how can I watch this later? Within a few days, this will be uploaded to the BYU Family History Library website. It will also be uploaded to the BYU Family History Library YouTube channel. So you go to YouTube and put in BYU Family History Library, you'll find. It says, when searching for a person's name, do you use quotes around the name? You can, but if you don't, you'll still find the name. It wants to know if I have any brick walls. Every line comes to an end. And if you want to call those brick walls, that's what they are. But exponentially, I have thousands of brick walls because all the lines come to an end at some point. The ones that go back to Adam are not believable. And the ones that usually go back into the 15 and 1600s, I have seldom found any to be believable. No, there's no way to set up an alert to search for new information on the Internet Archive. It just comes piling in. Like I said, in the last week or so, there has been over an additional almost 1 million new books added. So it's coming in at a fabulous rate, and you just have to keep coming back to it and using it like a constant resource. In other words, it's one of the first places to go to actually try to find some information if you want to find information. The question about the accuracy of the character recognition, or the OCR, optical character recognition, is tremendously accurate. Now, it's not perfect, but it is very, very accurate. And what you're looking at when you look at it are not OCR copies of it. They're digital images of the actual pages. So if there's a problem with the OCR, where they quoted it, giving you a text quoting of it, like on the left-hand side of the page, then that may be not correct, but the book itself, the pictures there, you can tell what it says, unless it's unreadable, obviously. Anything else? Really glad to have everybody here today, and thank you.
Thank you so much, James, for that wonderful presentation. We hope you will join us for our next webinar, which is on Thursday, July 21st with Maureen Brady. She will be giving a presentation entitled, "You Too Can Read Old Handwriting." A recording of this webinar will be made available next week. You can view that on our YouTube channel or on our website. If you have any comments or questions, you can always email us at fhl_webinars@byu.edu or follow Facebook and Twitter. Thank you and have a wonderful week.